Thank you everybody for joining this presentation. We are going to present you our interim results 2016 for the first half of the year. I'm CEO, founder of Ergomed. I have with me my colleagues. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning everybody, Stephen Stamp, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning, I'm Andrew Mackey, Chief Business Officer.
Okay, so Stephen, could you present the figures?
Sure. So we're very pleased this morning to present our half-year results for the 6 months ended 30th of June 2016. The headlines are that revenues were up 21% to 17.6 million compared with 14.5 million for the previous 6 months. The star performer in the Ergomed group was our subsidiary Pharmacovigilance, which specializes in pharmacovigilance, more of which later. The growth of Pharmacovigilance was 53% compared with prior year. Fantastic result. Gross profit was up 26% to 5.3 million compared with 4.2 million in the prior year. And EBITDA, which is our main KPI on an adjusted basis, was up 12% to 1.9 million compared with 1.7 million in the prior year. The adjustments to EBITDA were 0.4 million of M&A costs that related to the acquisition of Hemostats in May of this half year, and 0.1 million of R&D which was incurred subsequent to the acquisition of Hemostats. And we finished the half year with 9.9 million pounds of cash and 0 debt. Just touching on a couple of other balance sheet profit and loss items here. Admin expenses were up 900,000. We have been focused very intently in the last 6 or 7 months on corporate development, broadly speaking, and M&A activity specifically. And we've been looking to enhance our capabilities through the addition of Andrew and myself, first of all to the executive team, but also there's been some consulting costs, and we've added a small London office to further these initiatives. On the balance sheet, the big movers were goodwill, mainly driven by the acquisitions of Hemostats, which added 6.8 million to goodwill, and 1 million from the 2 CRO acquisitions we made in Germany, also in the half year. More again of that later. On the operating side, we had a busy 6 months, and you see on your screen here some snapshots of the press releases we've issued recently. Obviously the acquisition of Hemostats for 8 million upfront and 20 million success-based milestones was the big news in the half year. Alongside that, we raised 9.2 million in a cash placing. Then there were the 2 acquisitions in Germany, O&P, which is a long established traditional CRO with a broad client base in the German-speaking countries. The jewel in O&P's crown was something called an electronic data capture system, branded OP Verdi. This is a capability that we didn't currently have inside Ergomed, but we've already demonstrated through one of the other press releases you see on this slide that we've been able to add our global platform to their electronic data capture system to win business that neither of us probably would have won on our own individually. So the synergies are working nicely there. The second of those 2 companies, JASD, is a biostats and data management company. Again, a capability we didn't have in depth in-house. They are working on 12 Ergomed projects already, so the integration and the synergies are coming through nicely. Similarly, in the half year, there were 2 announcements from our co-development partners, Aeternus Antares and Ferrer. I'm not going to speak about those in detail. Andrew will talk about that later in the presentation. And then lastly, our Pharmacovigilance business was established in 2008 in Europe and has grown to become the leading independent pharmacovigilance business across Europe. We're now hoping to repeat that in the United States, and we established a footprint there through the opening of an office in Boston in June of this year. So now that concludes the sort of interim results presentation. We'll now move on more generally to our investor presentation to give you a feel of what's going on in the company more broadly, starting with our mission. So the 3 key elements here. First of all, we are 100% laser focused on building our profitable services business, both organically, where we're growing at 20%, but we have some very interesting acquisition ideas that we'll come to in a minute. Secondly, We are aiming to build a sustainable product development portfolio which will offer significant breakout upside valuation potential for our shareholders. We are of the belief that product R&D is not a sustainable model when done on a small scale by biotech, because biotechs cannot sustain failures. It's only sustainable by big pharma. We think we have the model through co-development, which Andrew will explain, to build out a portfolio, a little or no risk to the company, yet still offer significant upside potential. And that's what we're aiming for in the medium and long term, significant shareholder value. So we describe ourselves as a hybrid business in two parts. On the left-hand side of the chart, there are the services, which comprise outsourced clinical research for pharmaceutical companies, and pharmacovigilance services also for pharmaceutical companies. There are a full range of services across a global platform. These services are EBITDA positive today, will remain so, and there are numerous acquisition opportunities to enhance yet further that EBITDA, which we'll get to in a second. On the right-hand side of the house, we have product development, where we have a broad portfolio of co-development projects offering multiple shots on goal, and with hemostatics we now have wholly owned projects which offer yet further opportunities to enhance breakout upside potential. And now I'll hand back to Miro.
Thank you, Stephen. On the next slide, we just want to present you our comprehensive range of services which are listed on the left-hand side of the slide, and then you see the kind of services which are part of pre-approval drug development. This is a classical CRO positioning, which is very consolidated market with relatively slow growth rate, what you will see on the next slide. On the right side you have post-approval drug marketing part of the business, which we started to develop around 2008, and flagship of this development is our company division Pharmacovigilance, but we also develop services in the area of post-marketing research, observational trials, and stuff like that. So this is the area of business which is growing very rapidly, close to 20% per annum, and we are embarking on this growth. We also plan the acquisitions around that. In the pre-approval area, we want to do some geography strengthening, what we communicated at IPO, and we want to execute it further, as well as we want to penetrate more into orphan drug development market. So on the next slide, you see the snapshot of first half year result, as well as the to give you the presentation of ratio of pharmacovigilance and CRO service business in our revenue. Basically, the growth of pharmacovigilance business is really fantastic, with over 50% growth in first half of a year. I want to remind you that our CAGR since 2011 is close to 40%, so we are even accelerating this growth organically. While PV industry growth is also very, very high, 17%. On the other side, CRO service business, as I indicated earlier, has a relatively modest growth in the industry of 7.5%, while we've been growing around 11% in the first half of the year. What is interesting also to be stressed is the composition of this pie chart, where you see that about a quarter of revenue comes from pharmacovigilance now, but when you take into account that the growth of this business is very high and that we plan to do some acquisitions around this business, I believe that this pie chart will look quite different quite soon, that it will be more red part of that, which means that the stability of overall business will be even much stronger, because CRO business as a project business has certain lumpiness, and this is the nature of that business, while pharmacovigilance business is very predictable, stable business with almost 100% retention of a client base. So our aim is to balance even further this business in coming period. Going to the next slide, this slide speaks about key differentiator of Ergomed clinical trial management. On the left hand side you have a presentation what all CROs, pharma industry are doing in a classical trialing process. There are project managers, monitors, and they relate to the hospital which is down. in the slide. On the right hand side up you have Ergomed model consisting of study physician team and site managers. We have about a dozen of physicians which are dedicated only to this part of the business, which is really relating to the hospitals, to the investigators all over the world. This is completely global workforce which are visiting the sites in all countries where we manage the trials. And this is especially important in very complicated, demanding technically or medically trials, and proved to be very efficient in turning into the success one of the most complex trials which exist at all in clinical research. On the other side, we are pioneers of integrating site management model into CRO business. We started it more than 15 years ago. We are the only one company in Europe who integrated it, and we are spreading this model also toward Middle East and Asia. What does it mean basically? In site management team we have more than 20 people working in-house, and these professionals are identifying at the hospital level down the slide nurses which we train, educate, and they become our basically workforce in the hospital. They are consultants of Ergomed. We have more than 300 consultants, nurses across Europe and Middle East, which are working on getting a higher efficiency, enhanced recruitment, a better retention of patients in all parameters which are very critical for the development of products. Moving to the next slide, this is the short presentation of pharmacovigilance business, what we told earlier as well. We have close to 250 employees now. We serve more than 60 customers, and we manage the information safety and report to more than 100 countries worldwide. We have very high customer retention, as I stressed earlier, and strong backlog of contracts, and we are working on further acquisition plans which should come in next period. We got Queen Award for this business in 2014. On the next slide, you see the global platform of Ergomed. We are a truly global company. We have clinical trial operations, which means we have trials ongoing in hospitals in 54 countries, which is basically really the entire world where you can do the trials. When we've done IPO 2 years ago, there were 40 countries. Now it's 54, and growth came mostly through Middle East and Asia, which was also our strategic goal to expand the business there. Moving to the next slide, I would hand over to Andrew, who will explain you the co-development model.
Thank you, Miro. So after a number of years of operational trading history and the expertise that the company built up around drug development, Miro decided to create the sort of risk-sharing or co-development partnership model in around 2006, 2007. And the basic assumption here is that we offer to do the clinical trial activity at a lower cost, and in exchange for that lower cost, we ask for some upside of the product. So the basic idea is we want to enter into partnerships with companies who want to continue to be active in the product, continue to contribute both financially and operationally to the development of the product, but we partner with them to offer the clinical development skills and, in addition, some financial support. So the basic numbers are represented at the bottom of the slide. So we will contribute roughly a third to a half of the cost of the clinical trial, and that equates to roughly between $1 and $15 million. And for that contribution, what we ask is for about between 5 and 15% of the economics of the product going forward. So with this model, we've built up a portfolio of 4 products across 5 different studies. The idea here is to build a sustainable and diversified portfolio. So a biotech company will tend to have a couple of products in clinical development, and these will be tied to a certain platform or a certain indication. What we have here is a diversified portfolio, so different types of molecules, different types of diseases, different types of medicine. And so that each individual study, each individual product is an independent variable. So above the line, you see the 5 projects that we have under co-development where we have part ownership of the products. And below the line, you have the 2 hemostatic or surgical bleeding products where we own 100% of the products and are developing these ourselves. I'll talk about those in a moment. So to give you just two examples of some near-term events for our co-development partnerships. On the left-hand side here you have Ferrer. Ferrer is a mid-sized Spanish pharmaceutical company. They've got about €1 billion in revenue each year. And they discovered a new sleeping tablet, or a hypnotic. And this has a technical advantage that whereas most sleeping tablets will work for about 4 hours, so you take them as you go to bed, but you wake up in the night time, this has a better PK profile or pharmacokinetic profile, so it lasts longer during the night. You sleep throughout the night, but the PK works in such a way as that it clears through your system by the time you wake up in the morning, so you wake up feeling refreshed. This product is in phase 2, so that's mid-stage clinical development. We've completed the recruitment of the study. We're in the process of collecting all the data, and we'll be analyzing that data in the last half of this year, and we expect to report the results of this study. Ferrer will then most likely look to find a marketing partner for this product, and we will benefit from any licensing milestones that they achieve, and ultimately any royalties or sales that they achieve with the product, as we get a percentage of all revenues they generate from the commercialization of this product. On the right-hand side, you have Aeterna Zentaris. What they've done is they've taken a chemotherapy agent called doxorubicin and tagged it with a peptide. And that peptide helps localize it to the tumor, so you get a better therapeutic and safety effect. This is being developed in the phase 3 endometrial cancer study. Again, we've completed the recruitment in the study, so all 500 patients have been included. We're in the follow-up phase of this study, and we expect that this study should reach its endpoint in the first half of next year, where we and Aeterna Zentaris will announce the results. At that point, as this is a phase 3 study, the next step is to launch the product if the phase 3 is successful. Aeterna Zentaris may choose to launch it themselves in the US or globally, or they may choose to find a partner and they will benefit from the royalties of that partnership. Again, we will benefit from any sales milestones, any licensing milestones, or revenues they make from this product going forward. So that's our co-development partnership portfolio. We also, earlier this year, acquired a company called Hemostats that had discovered a new way to control surgical bleeding. So on the left-hand side of this graphic, you see an image of the vasculature or the blood vessels within an organ. The surgical bleeding market is tailored to address bleeds depending on where the bleed occurs. So you can see at the branch, the blue branch of the bleed, if you cut this vessel, you're going to get a very strong bleed, and you're going to have the opportunity to clamp that bleed or cauterize the wound. But if you cut towards the end of the branch, you see you'll have a vast array of smaller bleeds, and there you don't have those options. So hemostats are used for situations where you have multiple bleeds or bleeds where you can't use other approaches. So because of this segmentation of the types of products, whilst the whole market is large, a few $1 billion, each individual product is tailored for an individual bleed, so each product sells a few $100 million per product. What Hemostatics have done on the right-hand side is they've made a discovery of finding a new way of forming a blood clot, and they formulated this new discovery into a couple of different products. On the left-hand side here, we have the two lead products. So Pepperstat is called a liquid hemostat. So this is a liquid which is poured onto a sponge, and you press that sponge against the site of the bleed, and it stops the bleed. This is used when you have a flat surface. The second product is ReadyFlow. This is formulated, it's the same idea, the same hemostat, but formulated in a thick gel. This is used for when you can't physically get to the site of the bleed, so you have perhaps a puncture wound, you can squeeze the gel into the puncture and stop the bleeding in this way. Pepperstat is going into phase 2B clinical trials, so again, mid-stage clinical trials. We are running through the manufacturing process of that molecule at the moment, and we hope to start that clinical trial in the first quarter of next year. ReadyFlow is in mid-preclinical development. We're optimizing the formulation and the viscosity of the gel at the moment. We plan to take that into regulatory tox studies next year and get it into clinic in 2018. And these two products, as well as the other products that could be developed from this platform, overcome many of the disadvantages that we see from the products that are existing on the market. So firstly, because it's a synthetic peptide and binds directly to fibrinogen, which is the molecule which is the core of any blood clot, It acts very quickly. What we've seen with Pepperstat in a phase 1 clinical study where we looked at, or Hemostatics looked at 20 patients here in the UK, what they found is they were able to control the bleeding on average within 1.4 minutes. And if you compare this to the other market leaders in the field, they claim through their marketing literature to be able to control bleeding in about 3 to 6 minutes. So we see Pepperstat and ultimately ReadyFlow to be faster than the products on the market. In the second part of this middle graphic, you see a preclinical model. What I'll just say to that is the product has been tested in a variety of preclinical models, and it compares very well to all the other market competitors in terms of its speed and efficacy. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of this product is that because it's a synthetic peptide, it can be formulated in a ready-to-use manner. So you can keep it in solution or you can keep it in the gel. You keep those products in the fridge and you use them as soon as you need to use them. This compares to the other products that are on the market, which are all based on thrombin or other biological molecules. These molecules are quite fragile and can't be kept in a ready-to-use format. They either need to be frozen or dried, lyophilized, and then before they can be used, they need to be prepared. So these preparation steps can often take 5 to 15 minutes. So if you can imagine you're in theatre, you have an uncontrolled bleed, you need to make a decision to use a hemostat. We believe that the choice of having something that you can just grab out of the fridge and use immediately compared to something that you would have to prepare over a few minutes, we will have an obvious competitive advantage. So the next steps for these molecules I've mentioned already, but they both have interesting sales potentials of a couple $100 million each. We believe we can get Pepperstat to a market-ready position in 2020. We think ReadyFlow can get into phase 1 by 2018, and they both have good patent protection. So once launched, we'll have a secure marketplace for a number of years. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to finish off with a couple of slides then, talking first about our upcoming news flow and value inflection points. Andrew's already referred to the Eterna Zentaris and Ferrer inflection points coming up in the next 6 or so months. In addition to that, we have numerous hemostatics updates, and then also the opportunity for licensing deals with partners for hemostatics on the back of phase 2b data, for example, for Pepperstat, beginning of 2018. We are targeting to sign up 2 co-development deals per year to get to a steady state portfolio of 10 in the coming years. And I think you maybe expect to see at least one of those before the end of this year. We're also working intensively on acquisitions to augment our already impressive growth in our services business, focusing in the first instance on pharmacovigilance, PV, to expand that business, but also looking across the pond to build out our infrastructure in the United States. Now, if I may just finish on the last slide. So we've talked about profitable service business. We've talked about the potential breakout opportunity from our R&D portfolio. What you have here is an infographic showing how we intend to build shareholder value over the coming years. And there are 2 parts to this. If you look at the sort of dark blue part, this represents the solid, steady, cash generative, EBITDA positive part of our business, that being our services portfolio. That business, if it just continues to grow organically at the current 20% rate, over a period of 5 years will more than treble the value of Ergomed today. On top of that, we have the sort of breakout potential from our R&D portfolio, and that's what the light blue is meant to represent. So we would expect milestones some years, no milestones other years, but over a period of time we would expect also to build a steady but growing royalty stream, and that's what the light blue is intended to represent. Net, we are focused 100% on building shareholder value here, maybe 10x over the next 5 years. With that, I think we'll take questions.
Great, thank you very much, gentlemen, and I shall encourage our audience again to put in more questions. We have plenty already, so let's dive in. First question from a doctor, Dr. Brown. He is intrigued, given the, in his opinion, very sound strategic progress that the company has made in recent months, that the share price hasn't been reflecting that. Could you talk a little bit about investor relations and whether you are committed to more news and interaction with the marketplace, as indeed you are doing today?
I'll take that. So thank you for the question, Dr. Brown. We are similarly disappointed with the share price performance, as you might expect. I think part of the reason here is that we are working hard with the analysts and through them to institutions to get them to look at the company on a sum of the parts basis, because our current valuation really only reflects the value of our services business. There is nothing in our current valuation for the co-development portfolio or hemostatics, and that's the message we continue to work on. Secondly, in terms of actual things that we're working on today, obviously we are focusing increasingly on private client fund managers, and I have done a roadshow before the summer with Andrew. We have more planned in the second half of this year. We're also going to Germany to work on some investor conferences there. So believe me when I say we're on it.
Thank you. Quite a few questions about acquisitions, so I'll see if I can roll them up. You seem spoilt for choice given the enhancing opportunities in services and pharmacovigilance, but at the same time, is there scope to do further deals like the hemostatics deal, where you're in effect taking control of your own product development, or is that simply a question of finance, and if so, which would you be prioritising?
Maybe I can answer this question. This is a pretty strategic one. So, during our last fundraise in April-May, we clearly communicated to the market that we are raising proceeds on one side for the acquisition of Hemostatics, what we've done and acquired the company, and bigger part of proceeds was intended to be raised for services acquisitions. So basically, we are building up further the balanced business model. We are also committed to profitable company. So we are not driving Ergomed into biotech cash negative business. So definitely there is a commitment to profitability, and the only way to stay profitable is obviously growing service business. So you see that we have two drivers. One of them is Pharmacovigilance, which is growing with a CAGR of 40%, what I will repeat now. And we are going to build up M&A around this business to augment this growth. On the other side, we also have a very clear strategy of growing Ergomed into a fully established global player with the focus of complicated trials due to our model of trialing, and we would try very hard to penetrate the market of orphan drug development. So that would all contribute to very significant growth of our service business, and we will use proceeds and cash to push it forward. On the other side, we acquired Hemostatics due to opportunity. The main reason is really that the risk profile of that company is, by our opinion and our due diligence team, much lower than the classical pharmaceutical development, and that was the main reason. And we believe that with such risk profile and with a relatively limited resources needed to bring the product to proof of concept, and later probably through some kind of licensing deal to registration, in a very short period of time we can create a really phenomenal value for our shareholders. So we do not have intention to embark on full product development financing nor acquisition. I can make this statement now. Yeah.
Thank you, Miro. Very clear. In terms of looking forward, the very useful list of milestones that you're given on co-development products is in the pack. But without holding you to a promise, which product do you think might actually come to market first? Ferrer, Iterna, or perhaps even ReadyFlow?
No.
So the Iterna Centaurus product, Zoptrax, is the furthest in development. So as I mentioned during the presentation, this is in phase 3. The phase 3 has completed recruitment, and we're in the follow-up phase. So this study, this whole development program should reach its conclusion in the first half of next year, and therefore it would be ready to be, if this phase 3 is successful, it would be ready to be sent into a registration process in the second half of next year. So this would be technically the first product to launch, and it could launch as early as 2018, I would say.
Right, thank you. Right, a couple of personal questions, nothing too intrusive. Stephen, Tim is intrigued. You have a strong reputation in both the US and in the UK in the biotech sector. Could he ask what attracted you to join Ergomed recently?
Two things, yes. So I learned of Ergomed through a former colleague of mine, Rolf Stahl, who I worked with at Shire Pharmaceuticals in the early days, and he's the chairman of this company. He introduced me to Miro and the team and Andrew. So one was the team and the dynamism and the business plan they had put together. And secondly was the opportunity. So my background, I came up into the CFO role through investment banking and M&A. I would say I'm more of that type of CFO than I'm an accountant. So the opportunity to pull together a roll-up model here, an earnings accretive roll-up model, both geographically and laterally and vertically in terms of integration, was too good opportunity to miss.
Okay, and just so you don't escape Miro as well, and Brian, who met you at the time of the IPO, is similarly curious. The business has changed, the team around you has grown substantially. Do you still retain all your hunger and excitement from when it was your own company?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Brian, for this question. So, yeah, for me, I must tell you frankly, really, this is a fantastic experience, being on the public market. That was strategy I had in mind for a number of years. The market was closed, as you know, for also a number of years. And then when market opened, we've done IPO and fulfilled our strategic target. I really enjoy being on the public market, develop the company. I'm also proud that Ergomed is one of absolutely rare CROs in Europe who did IPO in the last 10 years. Which means something, and also public market platform allows me to build up a stronger team than I could do in a private environment, from executive management team, colleagues around me, as well as a board, which comes with fantastic experience. I want to remind you that on our board the chairman is Rolf Stachel, who basically created Shire with Stephen. Peter George, who is the CEO of Clinigen, which is one of the biggest success stories in the last couple of years in life science in London, as well as Chris Collins. So, you know, I can hardly imagine that I could achieve it being a private company. So I really enjoy this position, being in public market.
Great, and just time a last question, again slightly strategic. Have the board given any thought to paying a dividend in the near or medium term future? Obviously, we appreciate that Miro still owns a large portion of the shares, but in this time of low interest rates, have some of your external shareholders indicated that they would like a modest but progressive dividend to go alongside the fast-growing and profitable business that you have?
Yeah, this is quite a strategic question. We discuss it at the board level. We definitely plan to proceed with this strategy, paying the dividends with you know, kind of modest start and then increasing it. We believe that this might be interesting quite a lot, especially for private clients, and we want to attract private clients to this stock to increase the liquidity. So we are discussing very seriously. So Stephen, would you like to add maybe from CFO point of view? Yeah?
Sure. So that was the payment of a dividend was a strategic aim that was spelled out in the admission document at the time of IPO, and we fully intend to keep that promise. It's a question of when, not if. So obviously the Hemostats acquisition disrupted somewhat the smooth progression of our earnings and cash flow temporarily. I think we were just sort of sitting back and waiting for that to settle down, and now is the time to reconsider. So I keep looking out and look for news on that, I think, shortly.